Single dad gives his jacket to a freezing baby on the sidewalk, but a millionaire was watching and did something that left everyone in tears. Rate my story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The biting wind of the big city whipped against the single father's face as he hurried through the deserted streets. 30 years of life weighed on his shoulders like an invisible burden, each step echoing the responsibility of raising his 4-year-old daughter alone. The threadbare jacket barely protected his lean frame from the cold that seemed to seep into his bones, but he couldn't afford to complain. In a few hours, he had to be at the first of his 3 jobs, and being late meant losing the only reliable income he had left. It was then that his eyes caught something that made his heart stop for a second. There, amidst cardboard soaked by the early morning rain, a small child was crying desperately. The baby couldn't have been more than a few months old, its skin bluish from the intense cold, its tiny fists clenched and trembling uncontrollably. Without a second thought, the man, with his striking features and kind eyes, took off his only jacket and gently wrapped it around the abandoned child. The rough, worn fabric was all he had to offer, but at that moment, it was the difference between life and loss for that tiny being. His calloused fingers, hardened by heavy labor, softly caressed the baby's face, which gradually stopped crying and gazed up at him with large, trusting eyes. The overwhelming sense of protectiveness that bloomed in his chest reminded him of the first time he held his own daughter in his arms. What he didn't notice was the armored town car parked discreetly across the street. Through the tinted windows, a woman of stunning beauty and commanding presence watched the man's every move. The most powerful millionaire in the region had just left the most important meeting of her career, a negotiation that would decide the fate of thousands of jobs and move millions in capital. Her stock portfolio grew exponentially each quarter, and her crypto investments had multiplied her fortune to an astonishing degree. But none of that mattered right now. What she was witnessing through the window was something she hadn't seen in years in her world of deceit and vested interests. Here was a man sacrificing his own comfort for a complete stranger, expecting nothing in return. The scene touched something deep in her heart, hardened by years of business disappointments and superficial relationships. Impulsively, she ordered her driver to stop the car. Her expensive heels clicked on the wet pavement as she approached with natural elegance, each step revealing the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and closing multi-million-dollar deals. Her tailored dress contrasted sharply with the single father's simple clothes, creating an almost surreal image on that rundown city street. The man looked up, surprised, as the woman approached. Their eyes met for the first time, and an electric current passed between them. She felt the words catch in her throat in the face of his deep, sincere eyes, while he wondered what someone so refined was doing in this forgotten corner of the city. Her voice came out softer than she intended when she offered financial help to care for the abandoned baby. She discreetly mentioned that she knew of organizations that could ensure a better future for the child, and that she could easily cover all the necessary expenses. Her words were carefully chosen not to sound condescending, but the man's wounded pride interpreted the offer as yet another display of social superiority. Politely, but firmly, he refused any form of charity. He explained that he had already called social services from a payphone and would wait with the child until they arrived. His dignified, upright posture impressed the millionaire, who rarely met people capable of refusing money, especially in such desperate situations. Their brief but intense dialogue was interrupted by the arrival of a social services team. As the professionals took over the baby's care, the single father was finally able to retrieve his jacket, but something fundamental had changed in that chance encounter. He hurried away, worried about being late for work, but his thoughts remained fixed on the mysterious woman who had shown such genuine concern. She stood on the sidewalk for several long minutes, watching him disappear into the morning crowd. For the first time in years, she felt deeply moved by the integrity and kindness of a complete stranger. That man had awakened something in her soul she thought was lost forever, the ability to be touched by simple, selfless gestures. Back in the town car, she couldn't concentrate on the financial reports awaiting her analysis. The image of that man taking off his own jacket to protect an abandoned child replayed endlessly in her mind. She made a decision that would completely change the course of both their lives. She would discreetly begin to investigate who this man was and what circumstances led him to walk alone through the freezing streets before dawn. In the following days, she used her resources and contacts to uncover basic information about him. She learned he was a single father, working multiple jobs to support a young daughter, and lived in a distant neighborhood where rents were more affordable. Every detail she discovered only intensified her admiration for his determination and character, creating a dangerous obsession she didn't fully understand herself. What began as genuine curiosity was quickly turning into something much deeper and more unsettling. For 6 whole months, the millionaire began to frequent the places where he worked, always disguised as an ordinary customer. Her expensive clothes were replaced with simpler outfits. High heels gave way to comfortable shoes, and she learned to mask her naturally imposing posture. The transformation was so convincing that none of the employees suspected they were in the presence of one of the most powerful women in the region. His first job was at a downtown bakery, where he started at 5 in the morning, baking bread and serving the day's first customers. She started having breakfast there every Wednesday, discreetly observing his tireless dedication and the kindness with which he treated every person. His movements were precise and efficient, never wasting time or ingredients, and he always maintained a friendly smile even when visibly exhausted. In the afternoon, he worked as a helper at an auto repair shop on the outskirts of town, where his calloused hands showed a natural skill with tools and engines. The millionaire invented car troubles to justify her regular visits, pretending to be a demanding customer who only trusted that shop. During these fabricated consultations, she could observe his technical competence and the patience with which he explained the necessary repairs, even to less understanding clients. The third job was the most grueling, a night janitor in a commercial office building where he worked from 10 at night until 3 in the morning. Gaining access to this location required more creativity on her part. She leased an office in the same building under a fictitious name, creating a small consulting firm that existed only on paper. Her supposed late-night visits to retrieve important documents allowed for casual encounters in the hallways, where they would exchange polite greetings and comments about the weather. Each interaction revealed new facets of his character. He never complained about the long hours, treated everyone with equal respect regardless of their social standing, and demonstrated a moral integrity she rarely encountered in her own social circle. The conversations were brief but meaningful, and she noticed their gazes began to linger a little longer when they crossed paths in the silent corridors. During her discreet investigations, she discovered devastating details about his personal situation. His 4-year-old daughter looked more like she was 2 due to chronic malnutrition, a direct result of the constant financial hardship they faced. The girl attended an underfunded public daycare while her father worked, and she was often sick because of the inadequate conditions there. The apartment where they lived was tiny and poorly maintained, located in a neighborhood where violence was common and basic services were unreliable. Even so, he kept the place clean and organized, creating a welcoming environment for his daughter with the few resources he had. The peeling walls were decorated with colorful drawings made by the little girl, and he had built small wooden toys from scrap materials. The first significant turning point came when his daughter fell gravely ill with pneumonia. The girl was admitted to the hospital in critical condition, and the despair on his face was agonizing to watch. He spent his days rushing between the hospital, his jobs, and desperate attempts to raise money for proper treatment. The public health options were overwhelmed, and she needed expensive medications that weren't covered. The millionaire watched him waste away during those terrible weeks. He lost a drastic amount of weight, his eyes grew sunken and were always red from exhaustion, and his hands trembled constantly from the extreme stress. Several times she saw him crying in secluded corners, always hiding so no one would see his vulnerability. The sight of this strong man being consumed by anguish broke her heart in a way it never had before. Without hesitation, she used her contacts in the medical field to ensure the girl received the best care available. She anonymously paid for all the hospital expenses, including the imported medications and specialized tests that his basic insurance wouldn't cover. To maintain her anonymity, she concocted a story about a hospital emergency fund for low-income families, leaving only a discreet note that said, "Some angels really do walk the earth." His reaction was a mixture of overwhelming relief and profound confusion. He questioned doctors, nurses, and hospital administrators, trying to discover the identity of his mysterious benefactor, but everyone had been instructed to maintain absolute secrecy. The gratitude he felt was immense, but there was also a constant restlessness from being unable to properly repay this extraordinary gesture. As the girl slowly recovered, he intensified his search for the person responsible for the help. He spoke with neighbors, co-workers, and even strangers on the street, describing his situation and asking if anyone knew someone generous enough to do such a thing. His determination to find the truth was touching, but also dangerous to her plan to remain anonymous. During this period, the casual encounters between them became more frequent and meaningful. She always asked about his daughter's health with genuine concern, and he shared his joys and worries with an openness he never showed to others. The emotional connection between them gradually deepened, creating a dangerous intimacy that neither of them dared to name. Their conversations evolved from polite greetings to discussions about dreams, fears, and life experiences. He spoke of his plans to provide a better education for his daughter, while she invented stories about her own life, creating a completely fictitious persona of a working woman struggling to get by. The necessary lies began to weigh on her conscience, especially when she saw the absolute sincerity with which he opened up to her. The emotional tension grew with each meeting. There were moments of charged silence when their eyes lingered longer than was socially appropriate, and their hands would occasionally brush during casual conversation, sending an electric current through them both. He started to dress more carefully on the days he knew he would see her, and she began to anticipate these moments as the highlights of her weeks. But the situation became drastically complicated when his daughter had an unexpected relapse. The pneumonia returned with even greater force, and this time the doctors were less optimistic about her chances of a full recovery. The terror in his eyes was unbearable to witness, and she realized she would have to reveal her identity if she wanted to help again without raising suspicion about the coincidence of 2 consecutive financial miracles. The second devastating blow came when the single father lost 2 of his 3 jobs in a single week. The bakery suddenly closed due to the owner's financial crisis, and the auto shop was forced to lay off half its staff after losing a major contract. All that was left was the nighttime janitorial job, which barely covered their basic food expenses. The landlady, a cruel and inflexible woman, showed no sympathy for his desperate situation. She appeared at the door of the tiny apartment with an eviction notice in hand, demanding immediate payment of 3 months' back rent or that they vacate the property immediately. Her words were as sharp as knives, especially when she mentioned she didn't care if there was a sick child involved. He begged for more time, explained his daughter's medical condition, and offered to pay interest on the amount owed, but the woman remained adamant. The threat of putting a 4-year-old child on the street did not move her heart, which had been hardened by greed. The deadline was 1 week, not nearly enough time to find another place to live or to gather the money needed to pay off the debt. During those agonizing days, he seriously considered seeking out the mysterious person who had helped with his daughter's medical bills. He spent hours writing letters that were never sent, trying to find the right words to ask for help without sounding desperate or opportunistic. But his wounded pride always spoke louder, reminding him of the principles his own father had taught him about dignity and self-reliance. The millionaire watched all this, suffering closely, feeling each of his tears like a dagger to her own heart. Several times she was on the verge of revealing her identity and solving all his financial problems at once, but she feared that this revelation would forever destroy the purity of the relationship they had been building. The fear of being seen only as a source of money was paralyzing. It was then that she made a risky decision and devised a complex plan. Using one of her subsidiary companies, she created a job opening for a basic administrative position, with a salary sufficient to solve his immediate financial problems. The advertisement was strategically placed only in the locations he frequented, ensuring that he would be one of the first people to learn about the opportunity. The interview was conducted by a human resources manager who received specific instructions to hire him, regardless of his experience in the field. When Liam showed up at the office, nervous and wearing his best clothes, which were still worn from constant use, Isabel watched from afar through the security cameras, feeling a mixture of hope and guilt for manipulating the situation. The job was at a consulting firm she had recently acquired, a minor investment in her vast portfolio that included stocks in tech companies and holdings in international funds. To maintain her facade, she infiltrated the company as a regular employee in the administrative sector, creating a completely false identity, complete with a fabricated professional history and references that her own human resources departments would confirm if questioned. Working side by side in the same environment drastically intensified the closeness between them. During lunch breaks, they shared simple meals in the small company break room, talking about dreams that seemed unattainable and disappointments that had shaped their personalities. She constantly had to censor her words so as not to reveal knowledge about business and investments that a regular employee shouldn't possess. The conversations revealed deep aspects of both their personalities. Liam spoke about his difficult childhood, raised only by his mother after his father abandoned the family, and how he swore to himself that he would never do the same thing to his own daughter. Isabel made up stories about a middle-class family that had faced financial difficulties, creating emotional parallels that justified her empathy for his situation. The sexual tension between them grew almost palpably during these intimate moments. There were accidental touches that lingered longer than necessary, glances that met and hesitated to look away, and a growing physical proximity that they both tried to repress because they considered it inappropriate in the workplace. Her subtle perfume disturbed him in ways he didn't understand, while his gentle masculinity awakened sensations she had forgotten were possible. His daughter, Maya, also quickly became fond of her father's new co-worker. During the few times she visited the office after school, the little girl showed a special connection with the disguised millionaire. Small gifts began to appear discreetly: a children's book left on his desk, an educational toy that was left over from a non-existent promotion, special treats that Isabel won from a vendor. But the internal conflicts intensified when other employees began asking uncomfortable questions. Her naturally confident demeanor was difficult to disguise completely, and she occasionally demonstrated knowledge about the company's operations that a newly hired employee shouldn't possess. Seemingly innocent comments about business strategies and corporate decisions raised eyebrows among more observant colleagues. Their direct supervisor, an ambitious and suspicious man, began to ask direct questions about her previous experience and qualifications. She needed to invent increasingly elaborate explanations to justify her competencies, creating a web of lies that became progressively more difficult to maintain. The constant pressure of maintaining the charade began to affect her mental health significantly. At the same time, Liam began to question internally why a woman with so many resources and knowledge worked in a basic administrative position. Her clothes, although simple, were of superior quality to what her salary should allow. Her knowledge about culture, travel, and life experiences suggested a much more sophisticated background than she claimed to possess. The situation became even more complicated when the company faced a real financial crisis, unrelated to her manipulations. An important client cancelled a multi-million-dollar contract, putting the jobs of dozens of employees at risk, including Liam's. The irony of the situation was cruel. She had created a job opportunity to save him, but now that same opportunity was threatened by circumstances genuinely beyond her control. During an emergency meeting called by management, it became clear that drastic cuts would be necessary to keep the company afloat. The most recent employees would be the first to be laid off, placing Liam back in a situation of imminent unemployment. The despair in his eyes was unbearable to witness, especially knowing that she had the power to solve everything with a simple revelation of her identity. The tension reached the breaking point when he confessed his feelings during a moment of vulnerability in the empty company parking lot. The words came out charged with emotion and fear, revealing that he had fallen deeply in love with her, but felt completely inadequate for a woman he considered to be far beyond his social standing. The confession was abruptly interrupted when his cell phone rang with an emergency call from the hospital. His daughter had deteriorated drastically and needed to be admitted immediately in critical condition. The desperate drive to the hospital happened in tense silence, with Isabel insisting on accompanying him despite his protests that she didn't need to bother. During the cab ride, his tears fell silently as he held her hand tightly, seeking comfort in the only person who seemed to genuinely care about his suffering. The gravity of the situation made all social barriers and romantic hesitations become insignificant in the face of the possibility of losing the child. At the hospital, they discovered that the pneumonia had evolved into a critical condition that required immediate intensive treatment. The doctors were direct about the need for expensive experimental medications and specialized procedures that the basic health insurance did not cover. The amount needed was astronomical for someone in his financial situation, but represented less than an hour's earnings from her crypto investments. He found himself again facing the cruel reality of having to choose between his pride and his daughter's life. For 3 agonizing days, he remained at the hospital, watching the girl slowly waste away while receiving only the basic care available through the public system. His pleas to the doctors were heartbreaking, offering to work for free at the hospital, sell his few belongings, or anything that could help pay for the proper treatment. The millionaire followed every moment of this emotional torture, torn between the urgency of saving the child and the fear that her revelation would forever destroy the trust he had placed in her. Several times she was about to confess everything, but the words caught in her throat when she imagined the disappointment and humiliation he would feel upon discovering that all her advances had been based on lies. On the morning of the 4th day, when the doctors informed him that the window of opportunity for effective treatment was closing rapidly, he made the most difficult decision of his life. Swallowing all his pride, he looked for her in the hallways of the hospital, with tears in his eyes and his voice choked with emotion. He didn't come to ask for money. He came to beg her to visit the girl, as the child cried for her constantly and refused to eat when she wasn't present. The reunion in the hospital room was devastating for both of them. The girl, pale and fragile, connected to tubes and monitors, lit up upon seeing the woman she considered her special friend. With a weak but joyful voice, Maya asked her to stay and promised to try harder to get better if she didn't leave. The scene definitively broke the millionaire's heart, who realized that she could no longer maintain the charade in the face of so much innocent suffering. In that moment of extreme vulnerability, with the child sleeping between them after a cocktail of pain medications, both of them finally opened up completely. Liam confessed that he had fallen deeply in love with her, but feared that she deserved someone much better than a broken and desperate man. He revealed that he considered her the only good thing that had happened in his life in recent years, besides his own daughter. Isabel, with tears rolling down her face, began to tell the truth about her identity. The words came out haltingly due to the emotion as she explained about her fortune, her companies, and how she had disguised herself to get close to him. She confessed that everything started with admiration for his gesture with the abandoned baby, but evolved into a genuine and profound love that she had never experienced before. His initial reaction was one of deep shock, followed by devastating anger. He felt betrayed, manipulated, and humiliated to discover that all those advances had been an elaborate charade by a bored rich person. He accused her of playing with his feelings as if it were a cruel social experiment, questioning whether she had laughed at him behind his back during all those months of pretense. The confrontation between them was intense and painful, with him whispering his shouts so as not to wake his daughter, accusing her of emotional manipulation, and her trying to explain that her feelings had always been genuine. His words cut like razors when he questioned whether she really thought he was so pathetic that he needed charity disguised as romance. The humiliation he felt was overwhelming, especially upon realizing that all his co-workers probably knew about the charade. During the subsequent weeks, they completely avoided each other. Liam stopped working at the company, preferring to seek other opportunities rather than face the daily reminder of his humiliation. He plunged into a desperate search for new jobs, but the lack of recent references and the time spent caring for his sick daughter made his chances of placement difficult. Isabel, in turn, plunged obsessively into work, trying to forget the pain of rejection through complex negotiations and corporate acquisitions. Her assistants noticed a drastic change in her behavior. She had become colder, impatient, and demanding, as if she were channeling all her emotional frustration into her professional activities. But no amount of financial success could fill the void left by him. The suffering of both was visible to everyone around them, especially to his daughter, who did not understand why her special friend had completely disappeared from their lives. The girl cried constantly, asking when she would come to visit her again, and refused to believe the vague explanations her father offered about people sometimes needing to travel to distant places. The situation reached a critical point when the girl had a severe relapse, this time developing cardiac complications resulting from prolonged pneumonia. The necessary treatment was even more complex and expensive, involving specialized surgery that could only be performed in top-tier private hospitals. Liam again found himself without resources and without the pride to ask for help, but now his daughter's life literally depended on a financial miracle. In a gesture of total desperation, he sought out Isabel at her executive office. The secretary initially tried to stop him, but something in the intensity of his gaze made her reconsider. When Isabel saw him standing at the door of her office, destroyed by anguish and clearly in a state of absolute despair, she felt her heart race uncontrollably. He didn't come to ask for money. He came to beg her to visit the girl at the hospital one last time. He explained that his daughter was asking for her constantly, and that the doctors had suggested that the presence of loved ones could make a difference in her recovery. His choked voice revealed that he was putting the well-being of the child above his own wounded pride. The reunion at the hospital was charged with overwhelming emotion. The girl, even more fragile than before, smiled for the first time in weeks upon seeing Isabel enter the room. In that moment, observing the genuine happiness of the child and the tears of relief in Liam's eyes, Isabel realized that his love for her was real when he put the well-being of his daughter above any personal resentment. During the hours they spent together in that hospital room, with the girls sleeping between them, both of them finally spoke with total honesty. Liam admitted that his anger was mainly the result of humiliation and fear of not being worthy of someone like her. Isabel explained that she had lied about her identity because she feared being loved only for her money, something that had happened repeatedly in previous relationships. The girls' miraculous recovery coincided with the couple's gradual reconciliation. Isabel discreetly ensured that the child received the best medical treatment available, this time being completely transparent about her help. Liam accepted the financial assistance with gratitude and dignity, finally understanding that true love sometimes means allowing the people who love us to help us. In the following months, they built a new life together based on absolute honesty and mutual respect. Isabel gradually included him in aspects of her businesses, discovering that he possessed a natural intelligence for business strategies that perfectly complemented her technical expertise. Together, they created social programs to help other families in situations similar to the one he had faced. The wedding took place in the garden of the house Isabel bought specifically for them, far from the ostentatious luxury of her original mansion. It was a place where Liam truly felt at home, with space for Maya to play and a welcoming atmosphere that reflected the family values they both shared. The ceremony was simple but deeply emotional, with Maya as the official flower girl and a witness to the love she had helped blossom. The story ends with the three of them forming a united and happy family, where love overcame all social and financial barriers. Liam found not only a companion, but a partner who respected his dignity and valued his human qualities above any material consideration. Isabel discovered that true wealth was not in her investments or net worth, but in the ability to love and be loved for who she really was, not for what she owned.